Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different, and honestly, pretty mind-blowing. We are setting the stage to look at how we can use the absolute cutting edge of modern science to reach back through millennia and literally give a voice to ancient victims. We aren't just looking at dusty artifacts today, we are cracking ancient cold cases.
So can we solve a 3,000-year-old murder? It's a pretty provocative question, right? I mean, think about it. When we walk through a museum, we tend to see mummies and ancient sarcophagi as just objects, things frozen in space and time. But what happens if we stop looking at them as mere artifacts and start treating them like modern crime scenes? Can we actually crack a 3,000-year-old case without ever disturbing the remains? Spoiler alert, yes, we absolutely can.
So how exactly do we pull this off? Well, we use a modern forensic toolkit, applying true CSI-level technology. We're talking computed tomography, or CT scanning, to see right inside sealed objects. We use gas chromatography mass spectrometry to identify microscopic chemical fingerprints. We've got 3D rapid prototyping, so we can literally hold virtual bones in our hands, and craniofacial reconstruction to look these ancient people right in the eye.
All right, here is the docket for today's explainer. We'll start with Case 1, the Royal Misfit. Then we'll dive into Case 2, the Assassinated Lady. Next up is Case 3, the Tobacco Shaman, and we'll wrap up by looking at how science speaks for the dead. Let's get right into it.
Case 1. The Royal Misfit. A tight squeeze in an ancient coffin.
Okay, so up at the Bolton Museum in the north of England, researchers spotted something kinda weird. A mummy was actually brushing the paint off the sides of its own coffin. Now, Egyptian embalmers were usually meticulous, so this sloppy fit, that was a massive red flag. And here's where we get the ultimate historical bait and switch. For centuries, based on the beautiful hieroglyphs on the outside, this coffin was believed to hold a high-status female, a chantress of Amun named Tau Henet. But when researchers finally took X-rays of the body inside, it was a slenderly built male with a shaven head. So, who in the world was he?
Well, chemistry is what literally cracks this case wide open. GCMS analysis found traces of pistachio resin on his wrappings. Now that is a highly exclusive royal marker from the New Kingdom. But even more mind-blowing, the embalmers actually coated his left side in sheep fat and his right side in cow fat. Why? Because sheep symbolize the god Amun of the south, while the cow symbolize the goddess Hathor of the north. This young man was deliberately positioned in this incredibly delicate political and religious balancing act to appease a divided Egypt. And all of that information was encoded in a sample the size of a pinhead.
And that brings us to a huge breakthrough. 4. Out of 6 key craniofacial measurements of this mummy, an astonishing 4 matched Ramesses II perfectly. That signature overbite, the distinct nasal angle, those were undeniable family traits. And the other 2 measurements, they matched Seti I, who was Ramesses II's father.
So, the final verdict for Case 1? Our so-called female chantress was actually a royal misfit. He was a male blood relative of Ramesses II, likely a prince who served as a powerful priest. Tragically, though, CT scans showed severe tissue emaciation, pointing to a wasting disease, very likely cancer. It's this incredibly tragic irony, right? He had access to endless wealth and power, but none of it could save him from a disease that still haunts us today.
Next up, Case 2, the Assassinated Lady, the mystery of the sealed coffin.
Over in Newcastle, there was this high-status female from around 1000 BC resting inside a coffin so incredibly exquisite, the museum absolutely forbade opening it. No physical samples, no unwrapping. But when researchers used existing CT scans to peer through the sealed wood, the illusion of a peaceful death was instantly shattered. The 3D data revealed a massive, ragged stab wound in her abdomen, completely separate from the neat embalmer's incision. By analyzing the angle, military surgeons were able to map out the fatal attack. The assassin approached from the rear, thrust the blade upward into her highly vascular liver, and violently twisted the weapon to maximize the damage. Terminal blood loss would have occurred within minutes.
Surgeon Commander Mike Edwards, who has seen modern battlefield trauma firsthand, noted the absolute brutality of this attack. He said, "I would think it would just be a world of pain." It is so vital that we remember this isn't just data on a screen. This was a 30-year-old woman experiencing unimaginable terror in her final moments. But the violence against her didn't end when her heart stopped beating.
The physical attack was really just the beginning of a much darker conspiracy. What's truly fascinating here is that chemical analysis of a tiny piece of linen found in an old library book revealed her embalming was a rushed, overheated hack job. Even more chilling, scans showed her throat was completely removed. In Egyptian belief, you needed your throat to literally speak your name to Osiris so you could enter the afterlife. And to top it all off, the hieroglyphs on her coffin deliberately omitted the feminine T, incorrectly labeling her as a male.
So, the verdict for case 2. We're looking at a high-status Egyptian woman who was brutally assassinated, and whose journey to the afterlife was deliberately sabotaged by her powerful enemies. They didn't just murder her in life, they intentionally tried to destroy her soul. By removing her ability to speak and altering her name, they were trying to erase her from eternity entirely. But thanks to modern scanning, they failed. We now know her true story.
Let's move on to Case 3, the Tobacco Shaman, unwrapping the Cloud Man.
At a museum in Burnley, a 12th century Peruvian mummy was confidently labeled by 1913 explorers as a Chachapoya, a towering, warlike cloud warrior of the high Andes. But you know, science doesn't really care about tall tales. When forensic archaeologists used incredibly precise laser scans to virtually stretch the mummy out of his bound fetal position, the so-called towering mountain warrior stood at exactly 1.42 meters, which is about 4 foot 8 inches. Furthermore, the mud bricks and sand described in the Explorer's Journal, those don't exist in the rainy mountains. They exist on the coast. So our guy wasn't a mountain warrior at all.
But the thing that really made investigators stop in their tracks was this massive, square hole in his skull. Was it a fatal battle wound from a slingshot? Well, experimental archaeology using pig skulls and ancient obsidian blades completely proved otherwise. The clean cuts and healed bone edges indicated trepanation. That's an intense, ancient surgical procedure used to open the skull. And because the bone had actually healed around the edges, we know for a fact he survived this agonizing ancient surgery for months.
Now, let's look at the chemical map of his preservation, because it's just incredible. Artificial mummification in Peru is super rare, but GCMS revealed a literal microcosm of the ancient herbal world mapped directly onto his body. His head was treated with candelilla plant wax, sourced 2,000 miles away in Mexico. His torso was coated in protective balsam tree resin, his legs were sealed with insect wax, and insects were deeply tied to disease and spiritual cures. Oh, and to top it off, his body was artificially smoked using rare imported tobacco.
The final verdict here? This guy wasn't a prisoner of war or a common soldier. The staggering wealth required to import these specific, highly symbolic materials from thousands of miles away tells us he was an elite coastal tobacco shaman, a deeply revered holy man, intrinsically connected to the spiritual world, who is given the ancient equivalent of a massive state funeral.
Bringing it all together, science speaks for the dead, restoring identity through modern forensics. So, why does all of this actually matter? Well, looking at these cases leads us to one undeniable conclusion. Science truly speaks for the dead. By taking CSI-level technology and applying it to ancient history, we fundamentally rewrite the human story. We bypass the myths scribbled in old journals, we see right through the lies painted on ancient coffins, and we find the objective truth. It's not just about correcting a label in a museum. It's about overturning false assumptions and revealing the deeply complex political, religious, and intensely personal struggles of the past. But most importantly, it transforms these individuals from dusty objects in a display case back into living, breathing humans who felt pain, who held power, and who mattered. Science literally gives them their true identities and their dignity back.
I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. If we can extract a person's entire political allegiance from a pinhead of fat, or successfully reconstruct a violent murder from a sealed box 3,000 years later, what will our modern burial practices tell the archaeologists of the future about us? What legacy are we leaving behind in our own chemical fingerprints? It's something pretty incredible to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.